to the Three Inning Fan Show with me, Kelley Franco. I am so excited about our guest here today because we have Ben Horney of Front Office Sports, who's here to speak with us about prediction markets. Ben, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me again, Kelley. It is great to be back.
And again is the key word because let me tell you, you are in a very exclusive club of two-time Three Inning Fan guest appearances.
That's great. It's good to be exclusive.
Okay, so before we get going, folks, make sure you hit that subscribe button if you're watching on YouTube or if you're on Apple, Spotify, or iHeart, hit that follow button. So, like I said, Ben's going to talk to us today about prediction markets. Ben, give us the prediction market 101.
Yeah, it's a great place to start. So yes, let me go back. I believe December 2024 is when I kind of first off, prediction markets have existed for decades. It's not like a new product. But the explosion in popularity started in late 2024 as these newer platforms, Kalshi in particular, which we'll get into them a lot, they were offering event contracts, is what they call it, on the outcome of the presidential election, the US presidential election. So, as the election between Trump and Biden was coming up, the second election between them, uh, Kalshi was offering these event contracts on that. And the Commodity Futures Trading Commission, the federal regulator, CFTC, sued Kalshi to say you shouldn't be allowed to offer these. It's basically gambling on the outcome of the election. And that was a high profile lawsuit. So that was when I first learned about it.
And I think that you said Biden and Trump, but I think it was Harris and Trump,
Harris, excuse me.
right?
Yes,
Yeah.
it was that the Biden administration sued over the event contracts that were being offered on the
Oh,
Harris Trump election. Um, and so that kind of got them into the mainstream a little bit. Um, Now, the sports factor, which is obviously what we're here to talk about, that really began in January of last year. Kalshi, on the heels of the momentum they had from the interest in those political event contracts, launched some sports offerings, and they kind of immediately, they immediately became this flashpoint. So that's how we got to kind of the beginning of where we're at. Now, to give you the one-on-one on what these actually are. Prediction markets allow users to put money on the outcome of an event. So it's pretty obvious. You can think of how that fits into the sports world. It's very similar to sports betting, which is what we'll get into here. Who's going to win the game? Are the Yankees going to win the game against the Twins? Yes or no. It's a binary option, yes or no. And you trade, and you're trading against the other people that are trading. Um, so that is kind of the basics of how it works. They are, like I said, they're not just sports. There's political outcomes, but there's also things like will President Trump say the word Maduro during his speech? And you could put yes or no. Will the temperature go above 71 degrees today in New York City? Yes or no. It literally is limitless options of what can be traded on. That's the 101. Let's get back and let's dive into it.
and that's a really good place to start because yeah, there's a ton to unpack here, and I want to get in. I mean, there's so much I want to talk about with the nuances that could be involved with those questions, and especially that Maduro thing because it was
Yeah.
just in the news this past week. But back to this sports betting thing, because like you said, that's kind of why you're on my show today. What do the prediction markets advocates say is different about a prediction market as opposed to one of the sports books like FanDuel or DraftKings that we're used to seeing?
Yeah. So the key distinction that they're arguing, and this is being argued in multiple court fights right now, is that in traditional sports betting, you're betting against the house. And in prediction markets, you're betting against peers. It's peer to peer. Like you're on one side, and then other people that are putting money are on the other side. And that's what it's up against. That's the key difference. So the incentive for DraftKings is to make the line so that DraftKings, is going to come out well money wise. The argument would be that it's less incentivized, or there's not even the capability for, let's say, the prediction market company to play that house role. Now, there's questions around that because there are trading companies that are involved in these that buy into the bets to make, or not, trades to make sure that there's adequate liquidity and to make sure that the volume is to a level that they want. So it gets complicated, and these are complex legal questions that, again, are being argued right now all over the country.
Isn't there something about the prediction market saying that it's not a bet, it's actually a trade on a contract?
So yeah, they are. That's the other key piece of their argument is that they say it's similar to any other futures or derivatives contract that people trade on, and as opposed to sports betting, which is betting. Now, interestingly enough, I mean, these companies market themselves as, hey, you can bet on these things. Or in some cases they have. And then when they've been called out for it, they've changed the language. So it's really, again, it's like that whole aspect of it is this legal question. And some of the companies have to be careful because, don't use the word bet if you're going to argue in court that it's not a bet. The thing is, they look so similar. And if you really break it down, okay, whether you're calling it trading or whether you're calling it betting, you're putting money on what's going to happen in a sports game. I mean, it's sports betting.
So, could you, for our listeners, give us a simple example of what the so-called bet contract, whatever you want to call it, but what that contract would look like if you logged onto a prediction market to bet that the Yankees were going to re-sign Clay Bellinger?
Yeah. Okay. So let's say you're wondering, are the Yankees going to re-sign Clay Bellinger? You go on to Kalshi or Polymarket or Robinhood offers this, crypto.com. There's all kinds of places. That's another aspect of this we'll get into. And like I said before, it'll be a binary yes or no question. And you would click on the question would be, will the Yankees re-sign Bellinger? You click on yes, you put the money down. There's a line. The line is based on the betting volume. So like the line changes in real time, which is another interesting aspect of it. Now, lines change in sports betting too. But like the thing that these companies are hanging their hats on is that prediction markets give a real significant view of what people think. So if you're looking at the Bellinger line, and if a lot of the money is on the side of yes, then the prediction markets will argue that the crowd wisdom is telling you that that's the most likely outcome. And this is again another thing we'll get into, but part of that also speaks to like there might be someone or people who are putting money on that side of the bet who happen to know something about it. And that gets very controversial because, again, if we're going to get into the distinctions of terms, insider trading comes up.
Yeah, and we totally have to get into that. So before we do, you mentioned some of the major players in this space, Kalshi and
Polymarket,
I
yep.
keep hearing about. But FanDuels and DraftKings are getting into it too?
Yeah, so FanDuel, DraftKings, and Fanatics all towards the end of last year launched their own prediction markets apps. They're separate standalone apps. And a really interesting kind of piece of it for DraftKings and FanDuel is that they're focusing their prediction markets business on states where mobile sports betting is not legal. So at this point, they still seem to think that traditional sports betting is really the key business and that that's how they're going to make their money moving forward. But they see that Kalshi, Polymarket, and these other places are offering, again, what amount to sports betting in states like Texas, Georgia, California that don't allow it. And they're saying, well, hey, we got to get in on those customers. And if they're doing it and it's okay, then we're going to get in on it and do it. So they all launched those. PrizePicks is in on it. Underdog, Truth Social, Donald Trump's social media platform company, they're planning to launch one, although it hasn't launched yet. And again, I'm going to keep saying this over and over, other interesting pieces to get into. Donald Trump Jr., who obviously is affiliated with, the Truth Social company, is an investor in Polymarket through his venture capital firm, 1789 Capital. He's also a strategic advisor to Kalshi. And again, they're apparently building their own. So the Trumps are all over this.
Wait, he's both on the board of Polymarket and an advisor to Kalshi?
Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting.
It seems odd, doesn't it? I've asked up and down the chain about this, and it's, the idea is that The Trump administration is favorable to this. It's the opposite of Biden. I mean, as I said before, the Biden administration sued to stop this stuff. The Trump administration, the Truth Social is launching its own platform. So Kalshi, even though Trump is invested in Polymarket and it advises them as well, they say, look, anyone that's advocating for prediction markets, that's what we want. And so that's why it's not an issue with us that he's involved in both. But they're like bitter rivals, Kalshi and Polymarket.
Yeah, that's kind of what I would have thought. So it is interesting. But okay, so I think what you're saying, as I've come to understand this through speaking with you and doing my own research here, is that if we were to log on to Polymarket and we wanted to place this bet that the Yankees re-sign Clay Bellinger, it might assess the odds at 70%. And so I would spend 70 cents to bet with some other dude, maybe Ben Horney, that they were going to re-sign Bellinger. And then if I won, you would have to pay me $1. And if I lost, I lose my 70 cents.
Yeah. And I mean, like, so if I'm putting money on, let's say, the other side of the bet, I mean, technically, yes, my money, I guess, would be going to you, but it's like the money all goes into the pool. And that's where they have what's known as clearinghouses that help certify the trade. So once it's all said and done, they have places that are making sure that everyone gets paid out.
And they call these things trading contracts, but the attorney in me can't help but ask the question, is there actually a contract?
I mean, that's a good question. I think that they would argue that the contract, that you're entering into the contract by putting your money on the yes, and that if you read the terms and conditions of their website, it probably says something along the lines of if you put your money in, it tells you what you are now getting into when you put your money on it.
Well, the reason I ask is because with some of this Maduro business in the last week, I read that there was a dispute over the definition of invasion because some people had bet on Polymarket or Kalshi or wherever in the prediction markets that the U.S. would invade Venezuela. And then Polymarket maybe was saying, oh, well, what happened doesn't count as an invasion, so we don't have to pay out on those bets. So that's when the attorney in me was like, well, wait, where is this contract? Do they define?
Well, so yeah, that's a great example of like a question that I think a lot of people that are looking at this space and even using these platforms are wondering, because who gets to decide? They also have markets on crazy things like, will Jesus Christ return by the end of 2027? What you have to do is you have to click through and really read what the terms say. Whether or not that will always be a failsafe and give you the clear definition of what's a winning trade or not, I'm not totally sure. I'm not a heavy user of these. I've never put any money on them. I do have the app so that I can try to keep track of what they're offering, but you have to read the fine print because, yes, essentially Polymarket in that case gets to decide, well, maybe they determine that we didn't send troops in, so that's not an invasion.
Sounds like you got to tell Dan Roberts you got a business expense you got to exercise here.
Yeah, it's a good idea.
So let's bring it back to baseball a little bit and the other professional sports leagues. Tell me about the ties, if any, between the prediction markets and the sports leagues. Is it just like with the sports books or different?
So it's evolving. For the better part of this, or for a better part of last year, there was no relationship, and the leagues, including the NCAA as well, all these organizations were very adamantly opposed to them. And the idea is that there's not a really strong regulatory framework around it. So how do you police it? I said earlier in the very beginning that these things are regulated by the CFTC, which is a federal regulator. The CFTC is, especially right now, it's a pretty small part of the government. Their employee counts down over the last couple of years. Their new chair just got approved with this guy, Mike Seelig. So they do kind of have someone at the head of it now, but they were operating without really a confirmed head for a while. So the leagues want that certainty of that, like there's a regulatory framework. The NHL is the only one of the real major leagues to have gotten in on this. They announced a few months back that both Kalshi and Polymarket, they announced them as official partners, which is always interesting that they were both. And Gary Bettman, the NHL commissioner, has said that the reason the NHL feels comfortable with it is because being directly involved with them gives them some semblance of control. They said that they can ask these platforms to take down contracts if they feel they're controversial or they don't like them. Kalshi, I believe, told me that yes, that's true. They haven't had to take any contracts down though yet. So the NHL is kind of the first mover there. Major League Baseball is not in on this at all yet. And we can get into that, but they're at front office sports, not myself personally, but we reported about a memo that MLB sent around over the summer about these. The Major League Baseball sent a memo to all the teams instructing players, same rules for sports betting go for this. So you cannot be putting money on games that you're involved in. Don't be putting money on any Major League Baseball games. And also just kind of basically saying, we do not approve of these prediction markets.
So is that's not any different from the cardinal rule of no betting on baseball?
Yes, no, totally. The real difference at this point with the betting and the prediction markets is that sports betting has proliferated so much since 2018. The federal ban on sports betting was struck down through a Supreme Court decision, and then since then, state by state, a bunch of states, 39 to this point, have legalized it in some fashion, and Washington D.C. as well. And so, really, what happened there, from my view, is that the leagues didn't have much of a choice. Sports betting was becoming the biggest industry in this country. And you're a major sports league and you're really not going to have any affiliation. So they all kind of just came to realize that this is happening. There's going to be regulatory framework state by state, and we will still have rules. You still can't bet on games. But hey, we're Major League Baseball. We're going to have a partnership with DraftKings. We're going to have a partnership with FanDuel. So we're still in the early innings, to have a baseball pun, of the prediction markets, whole thing. So I wouldn't be surprised to see the other leagues jump on board eventually because it feels inevitable. Like the rise of these things feels inevitable. And I saw this firsthand as I've been covering it. It's hard to separate what's hype versus what's real, especially on the internet. You're like, how popular are these things really? But billions of dollars have been invested in these companies now. So it's very legitimate.
That's wild. So you mentioned that the CFTC could possibly be the entity in charge of regulating the prediction markets. That's the Commodities Futures Trading Commission, right?
Yes, yes.
And so that would be different from sports betting because sports betting is regulated by the individual states, correct?
Exactly. So that is, again, on the legal front, that's what's being fought over. So one of the main arguments that like Kalshi, and Robinhood is involved in some suits too, and crypto.com as well. Interestingly, Polymarket has avoided real legal issues so far to date, although they have previous legal issues that I can get into in a second. But one of the main legal arguments is that there's a federal preemption. So the prediction markets claim we're federally regulated by the CFTC, and that preempts state law. So the states are not allowed to jump over the federal government and say, wait, this is not allowed in our state, because the federal government says it's okay. That's going to be decided in the courts. And in speaking to many attorneys over the course of the many months I've been covering this, basically everyone thinks this is eventually going to go to the Supreme Court because what's happening is that there's differing opinions depending on what court it's in. So you're going to get a circuit split, which I'm sure you know what that is, although maybe some listeners wouldn't. So a circuit split is when one federal court decides one thing on an issue, another court decides the opposite on the issue. The cases get appealed up to appellate courts, and basically there's just no consensus from the courts. So eventually one of these cases gets to the Supreme Court. Now, ultimately, the Supreme Court decides what cases they take up and what they don't. But the Supreme Court took up sports betting. So if this gets to that level, basically the country is going to need the Supreme Court to weigh in to tell us what are the rules.
Yeah, it seems like it's definitely heading in that direction. And in case our listeners don't know, it's not necessarily the biggest or most important cases that get to the Supremes. It's the ones where there's a split among the circuits and the Supremes have to lay down the law. We are talking with the great Ben Horney of Front Office Sports, and you should be following him on X and also signing up for his newsletters because they're great. Ben, tell us where we can get your newsletters quick.
Yeah, well, first of all, frontofficesports.com. My newsletter is called Asset Class. Definitely subscribe to it, but subscribe to all of our newsletters while you're there, tuned in, the memo. We are at the forefront of the business of sports, all aspects of it.
They're great. I get these newsletters every day in my inbox, and at lunchtime, I can just kind of whip through them and I know what's going on. So, Ben, you mentioned a few minutes ago that Polymarket was having some issues in the United States. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so this now we're going back to the Biden administration. When Biden was in office, Polymarket was operating and it reached a settlement with the CFTC, with the Biden era CFTC, under which it didn't, one of those classic things where it wasn't admitting or denying having done anything wrong. They paid a $1.4 million settlement to the federal government and they
Which is kind
agreed.
of nothing, by the way.
Which I mean, it's funny $1.4 million would be a lot to me, but in the grand scheme of things for these sorts of things, no, it's
Yeah.
not that much. And they were prohibited from operating in the United States. So Polymarket has still been operating internationally. And then what you'll see reported a lot is that people have been able to get around that by using VPNs. I feel like that is very pervasively reported as fact. I'm sure that it was happening, but I mean, I don't know firsthand how many people were bypassing the law by using VPNs to use Polymarket. Polymarket has now been welcomed back into the US after about 4 years of that. And it goes to what I was saying before about the Trump administration being more favorable to it. So Polymarket's full relaunch still hasn't quite happened. I mean, it's available. There's a wait list right now. If you get a invite code, you can get, there was, when I first tried to sign up, there was like 300,000 people ahead of me on the wait list. Suggestion
Wait,
for you.
so
Yeah,
just anybody can't log on to Polymarket and start betting right now?
correct. Although it still is, I mean, I don't know for sure whether this is almost a marketing situation because they are allowed. They're back and you're allowed to use it. But there's a wait list and it might be kind of a marketing thing to build hype. Or it might be like they didn't want to be flooded with so many US users because maybe the tech can't handle it. I was going to say a tip for any users who are interested in Polymarket. I used the word Twitter and that was my promo code and I got through. And the only reason I knew of that promo code is because someone posted it on Twitter. X.
Huh.
Yeah.
Fascinating. Yeah, it could be a marketing thing. It sounded like, when they're trying to sell you a timeshare and they're like, we don't have any left.
Yeah.
And then they talk to the manager and miraculously there's one more.
So they've been hyping up their return since the summer. And as far as I'm aware, they were able to relaunch as long ago as the summer. And it didn't quite happen. What they did was they acquired a federally licensed exchange over the summer called QCX. And that was their kind of fast track into this. Like it gets complicated and we don't need to go into all the details because frankly, I will screw them up. But you have all these different pieces kind of the framework of how these companies work. One of them is having a federally licensed exchange. You can go through the process of getting licensed. You can build your own, or you can buy one. This thing QCX had the federal license. They weren't like a major prediction markets offerer, but it was a easier, faster way for Polymarket to get back into the United States. So interestingly enough, Kalshi has been getting all this volume since the start of NFL season, which is easily the biggest moneymaker for sports betting. And Polymarket didn't really come back to the United States until pretty deep into the NFL season, and then it's still not fully relaunched. So you wonder how much volume did they miss out on this season, but they're probably playing the long game and think that they'll be the ones who come out on top, which that's another topic we'll get into, who are going to be the last man standing here.
Yeah, for sure. I do want to talk about the future. But so quickly, there's all this legal action going on, cease and desist, and arguments over if the Commodities Futures Trading Commission regulates or the states regulate. Through all of this, are these prediction markets still operating?
Yeah, they're still operating. So what's happened earlier or last year, a number of state regulators sent cease and desists to places like Kalshi and Robinhood and Crypto.com and others, basically saying you have to stop offering this here. It is not allowed under our state law. And we will seek enforcement if you don't. What That hasn't caused anyone to stop offering them. What happened in a number of cases, Kalshi actually sued the regulators and said, "Hey, this is illegal. It's illegal that you're trying to stop us because of the federal preemption point that I made before." So to date, all of those cease and desists have basically resulted in lawsuits. And there have also been cases of states suing. So in a number of cases, it's Kalshi suing the regulators. Then you have Massachusetts sued Kalshi. You have a number of Native American tribes in California and Wisconsin, two different lawsuits that sued Kalshi and others. And that's again another piece of this. Native American tribes who have one of their last kind of sovereignty bastions that they have in this country is ruling over gaming in certain areas of the country. And they are up in arms because this is not only eating into their profit and revenue, but it's also just kind of that like, hey, this is the last thing that we have in the country. And now we're being trampled over by these prediction markets. So that's another fascinating part of this to keep an eye on.
Absolutely. Let's talk a little bit about enforcement and monitoring. Now, I know that some betting schemes have been uncovered because sometimes regulators detect an unusual amount of activity on a weird, prop bet, like whether the first pitch of a game was going to be thrown in the dirt or something like that. Is there that kind of monitoring for these prediction markets?
So there is, Kalshi, for example, uses one of the main works with one of the main integrity monitors. I think that it's a little bit more challenging to monitor to the same level as sports betting because there's not a broader regulatory framework. So again, it's like the CFTC. Yes, it's a federal regulator, but who's working at the CFTC and who is there even to do the enforcement? Like that's what's not totally clear. And also, do they even want to do enforcement? That's also not totally clear. The guy who was newly approved, Mike Seelig, he was asked during one of his confirmation hearings about sports event contracts, which is what they're called, and he deferred to the courts over and over. He said, this is something that I will wait for the courts to tell me. So the federal government, on one hand is saying, let's let these cases play out, otherwise we're not going to take a position, but like that almost is taking a position because you're not doing anything to stop this crazy rising tide of prediction markets. But yeah, I would expect that ultimately you should have the same sort of monitoring. But is the monitoring working that great in traditional sports betting? I mean, yes, they have uncovered things, and there would be the one side of the argument that shows the system's working. But for every Emmanuel Clase and Luis Ortiz, I mean, how many others are there that we don't know about?
We don't know what we don't know.
Yeah.
Well, so let's talk a little bit about insider trading, which is really interesting in the sports context because we don't usually use that term in the sports context. We think of it like who was the guy in that movie Wall Street when we were growing, Gordon Gekko,
Yeah.
like insider trading. But what's the risk here with insider trading?
So this is a really interesting part of all this. To this point, the prediction markets are almost pumping the idea that it's good to have insider info. Now, they're not going to call it insider trading. Insider trading with companies and stocks, that's regulated by a different regulator. That's the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission. But kind of one of the things that they say is a benefit of this is, hey, if you know a lot about a subject and you do have information that you think gives you a leg up on one of these trades, that's a big benefit. Go put your money on it. That creates a lot of potential issues, right? We just saw this with the Maduro thing with Venezuela. So, I actually wrote about this today. So a random Polymarket account that is anonymous. Now, Polymarket works on crypto. It's a blockchain thing, which also makes it harder to know who is behind these accounts at times. Where in sports betting, I do kind of feel like it's, you're betting and they know everything about you. FanDuel knows everything about me because I have their app. At least that's what I assume. So a random anonymous account put money on trades related to Venezuela, including whether the president Maduro would be captured by the United States before the end of this year, like shortly before the United States went and captured him. And this account made over $400,000. So that kind of blew up on the internet, and it led this congressman, Representative Richie Torres, to introduce legislation. He introduced it today that looks to ban insider trading. And that bill, which is not focused on sports, it's focused on government officials, congressional staffers, and other people in the government realm that either have inside information or could reasonably be thought to obtain inside information. Totally not allowed to put money on anything policy related, because it really, I mean, it does seem very unfair. If you know that the US is planning some kind of action in Venezuela, you can just go make money on it. And then the people who think that's unlikely are just totally, unwittingly losing their money.
Yeah, or in the sports context, if you're going to bet on a game tonight and say you're the pitching coach for some team and the Cy Young winner is supposed to go for your team tonight, but you know that, what, his elbow's bothering him and it's going to be a late scratch. I mean, that's not fair.
Well, it's one of those things with prediction markets, like I said before, how we're at the early innings. There's so much that may come out later, right? That we end up being like, oh my God, like this thing happened 2 years ago that we didn't know about. And then there's also so much that we probably will never know about because it's hidden and the monitoring isn't strong enough. I mean, the NBA case with sports betting is another good kind of example of what you're talking about, where the player Terry Rozier allegedly took himself out of a game early because there was betting going on that he knew about and was aware of and was kind of involved in. That could happen with prediction markets. I mean, it could happen all over the place with baseball. There's so many things that you could put money on with this. And again, they really offer such an array of things. So will the first pitch be a ball? Will Aaron Judge hit a home run tonight? Will such and such pitch tonight? Some relief pitcher. I mean, there could be something like that. And to your point, the pitching coach can be like, hey, we really got to get this guy in the game. And it's because, his like friends put a bunch of money. It's not guaranteed that that's happening, but these are the risks. And it's the sort of thing that you do want guardrails in place so that normal everyday people aren't just getting totally screwed over.
So we're still in the infancy, and these guardrails, we all know that they're needed, but they have yet to be implemented, and it's just still inchoate.
Yes, that would be an accurate description, I would say.
Well, so let's wrap up with talking about the future of prediction markets. And yeah, who's going to be the last man standing? Is it just going to merge with sports books? What's going to happen?
So, like I said before, it was hard to tell what's hype versus what's real when it really started becoming real because of the money that's been going into it. So you have real serious institutional money going into it. So and it has ramped up in an insane way in a short amount of time. So Kalshi over the summer raised $300 million. It was a round led by, I think it was a venture firm called Paradigm. There's a number of other venture firms involved. A few months ago, Kalshi raised $1 billion additional dollars. So in a period of just months, it went from, hey, people are down to put $300 million into this company to people are now putting $1 billion into it. Like, that is such an insane amount of money. Polymarket in October reached a deal where the Intercontinental Exchange, which operates the New York Stock Exchange, agreed to invest up to $2 billion in Polymarket. And that deal valued Polymarket at $9 billion, is what people were saying. So the operator of the New York Stock, I mean, it doesn't get much more serious than the company that operates the New York Stock Exchange. So the fact that they are getting in on this, and the fact that all these major venture firms are getting in on it, and Robinhood and all these big, Robinhood wants to be the financial super app that you can already just trade on your phone. And now they have prediction markets, and DraftKings is, and FanDuel are putting hundreds of millions of dollars into this. So obviously it's not going away. As far as who's going to be left standing, it remains to be seen. I mean, Kalshi has this leg up because they were early. Polymarket existed before them, but Kalshi got to kind of like jump ahead of them while Polymarket wasn't allowed in the United States. If you ask Polymarket, I think they would say Kalshi is like basically a copycat. Um, will both of them continue to exist? Certainly for now. Uh, but Robinhood thinks that it's going to be the last man. I mean, if you ask any of these companies, they all think they're going to be the last man standing. When I speak to experts, the bottom line is there's going to be consolidation. That's one of the things I'm looking for this year. As much as it seems absolutely crazy and unlikely right now to say that, let's say, Kalshi and Polymarket would ever merge, DraftKings and FanDuel tried to merge. If that was 2016 or something. Now, the deal didn't end up going through, but that would have seemed insane before that happened. So it's what you said before. You don't know what you know until you know it, right? This stuff is going to keep existing, especially, and the key reason that you can be confident in that is that all this institutional money that's going into it. So people are backing it. Um, Kalshi Polymarket, I would expect to still exist for a while. Robinhood's not going away. Crypto.com's not going away. Is the Truth Social platform going to be successful? Who knows? When are they going to launch? Who knows? But this year, I'm expecting there to be some deal making. I'm looking forward to seeing what happens there. I had been wondering whether DraftKings or FanDuel might buy Kalshi, for example. That didn't happen. The other thing, especially with Kalshi and Polymarket, I've been told by some deal experts they're pretty good candidates for IPOs eventually. Now, it's still early. They're trying to grow right now, but they could go public. Polymarket has this deep relationship with the New York Stock Exchange. So I would expect that. I don't know if that would happen this year. That's probably a little further out. But there's going to be deal making in the space. There's going to be IPOs. That's going to be happening.
That is wild. I mean, that's a real institutional blessing to have the backing of the New York Stock Exchange.
Yes. Yes, very much so. That was big get. And then, the other piece that I also want to make sure that we touch on, not quite the money that's coming in, but so the NHL, right, announced the official partnerships with Kalshi and Polymarket. Two kind of factors on this. In more recent weeks, NHL teams, there's been a couple of deals. So the Blackhawks were the first team to reach a deal with one of these. They had a deal with Kalshi. So I don't know the financial terms of that deal, but basically at Blackhawk games, they'll now be promoting Kalshi. There will be like various things that they do with Kalshi. Just earlier this week, the New York Rangers announced a deal with Polymarket. And so same sort of thing. So obviously that's because they have the blessing of the NHL, which is in on this. That's why you're not seeing any NBA, like the Knicks were not involved in the Polymarket team, even though the Knicks and the Rangers both fall under Madison Square Garden Sports Corp, which is a publicly traded company. But the NBA has not given this its blessing, so the Knicks aren't involved in that deal. It's just the Rangers. So the other part that I was going to say was, in terms of partnerships, Kalshi and Polymarket especially have been landing all these mainstream partnerships. The Dow Jones Wall Street Journal just announced a partnership with Polymarket this week. CNN and CNBC, I think it is, have partnerships with Kalshi. So like when you're watching the news, you're going to start to be seeing, here's what the forecast is on Kalshi about such and such issue. And you have things like that going on all over the place too. So it's this like push for inevitability that they're doing. And it seems like the prediction markets are winning that push because at this point, they're too out there. Once the genie's out of the bottle, you can't put it back in.
That is crazy. And what a just fact and entertainment and informative filled half hour that was. Thank you so much, Ben.
Well, it comes from months and months of having to constantly pay attention to this stuff because it's like every time I turn my head, there's a new thing that I have to write about.
Well, and it was really great to realize I could ask you to do the show and for you to say yes, because if our listeners are anything like me, they've heard these words prediction markets, but you kind of ignore it at first because you got too many other things to worry about in life.
Yeah.
And finally you're like, wait, what did I miss? What are these things?
Yep.
And you have kind of filled in all the blanks on it.
It's been nice for me because I was talking about this to my family, to my friends. No one knew what it was. And it was like I was the crazy person. Now it's gone mainstream. So everyone's like, oh, hey, I saw an ad for Kalshi. And I'm like, yeah, exactly. Yeah.
All right, Ben. So you know the deal because you've been on this once before. And we end every show at the 3-Inning Fan with what's good to eat while watching the ball game. Now, last time, you can't repeat. Last time we had hot dogs and ice cream out of the helmet.
Yep.
So you got to have something else you like to eat while watching the ball game.
Yeah, so I know that I knew this was coming, so I gave it a lot of thought, almost as much thought as preparing for the prediction markets conversation. Let's say that I'm going to a ball game and maybe I had hot dogs for dinner last night, so I'm just not in the mood.
It's a real problem.
It's a chicken fingers and fries basket. I think that you can't get better than that. I would submit that that's the most delicious, comforting meal to eat. I get that it's like a children's meal, but if it was healthy, if no one was paying attention to what I was eating, I might eat chicken fingers every single day for dinner.
You know, you are not the first chicken tendies guy on the show.
I'm not surprised. It's
Yeah.
so they're too good.
Yeah. It's a repeat selection. All right. Well, Ben, tell us again where our listeners can find you.
Frontofficesports.com. You know, my name's Ben Horney, as you've said over and over. So look for me on Twitter. Sign up for my asset class newsletter. Sign up for all the front office sports newsletters. Follow front office sports, by the way, their accounts, because our social media team is better than any social media team that has ever existed in history. So they're going to be sharing my stuff. They're going to be sharing everything that you need to hear about. And yeah, we're, like I said before, we're all over the business of sports. So whether it's prediction markets, whether it's, we just reported about David Cohn and what his future might be in announcing. We're all over all of it. We are the place that you want to be.
You know, and we have to remember that everything we see on the field, the pitch, the court, it is all the result of money. So you've got to know what's going on the business side.
That's right.
All right. Well, join us again, Ben. And listeners, thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, Kelley.
Cheers.